And there we go. Look at
The
that.
broadcast is live. That's all I want to say, and that's all I have said to date right now. I haven't said anything else except what I'm saying now. He's New York Vinny. He's in Seattle, Washington. I'm
And
Michael
he's
Knight. I'm in
Michael.
LA
Yeah,
for
and
as
he's
long
Michael.
for as long as it's going to be here. We'll talk about that later. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10 past 10, you'll see our Shana Punhams right here on your screen. There's
What?
our beautiful face,
Shanna Punim?
Shana Punham. It's Yiddish.
Ah, okay. He's a good boy. He's got a Shinga Punim.
It's got a Shana Punham on it. By the Shana Punham. We were going to have there was a gal who was going to do traffic for us. I don't think she may have done some things for us at KJR, and she was an actress and comedian, and her traffic name was going to be Shayna, and no one in Seattle would have gotten it. There might have been a couple of Hasidic guys on Mercer Island who said Shayna Punham is doing traffic.
It's
Doesn't
like,
seem
damn it,
right.
what is going on here? All right, that little trip I told you that I had to take, I'm going to have to take it right now.
All right, Vinny's got to go
Tap
sign for a
dance for
package.
1 second.
See what I can do. There's an organization here in Los Angeles. We'll talk about the weather that's coming in, called the WGA, the Writers Guild of America. They're over 100 days into their strike against the studios for an equitable deal that includes the evolution of the industry to the point where they get money uh, for reruns, of course, for the initial project, for residuals around the work that they do. And in addition to that, they want to have allowances within the new contract for artificial intelligence. And most important is their cut of the streaming funds, which, interestingly enough, are secret. You can't, nobody knows except for the studios how many people stream a show. And those numbers have been kept secret from within the industry, and people can take a wild guess, but really that's all it is. They're probably not getting an informed guess. Netflix ain't going to talk about it. CBS and Warner Brothers and Paramount don't want to talk about it, and so it remains a secret. So you're asking for a deal that includes a section or percentage of a flow of dollars and cents to your pocket that cannot be measured because no one will talk about how many streams there are, how many people stream shows and watch them. So that's going into its 100th day. We're past our 100 days, and it turns out that now America is with the writers. A recent poll came out today that was listed in Variety, Daily Variety, that said 67% of Americans side with the writers in their strike against the studios and the producers. So we'll see if that comes to a head, because it's coming to a head, Vinny, as the heads of the studios are going to have a meeting with themselves. The writers are not invited. The representatives are not invited. The outcome of that meeting is to be secret, and that's coming up. But it sounds ridiculous that they're having a meeting with themselves to decide what to do about the writers. But at the same time, it's the first break in over 100 days of any sort, because one of the great techniques for negotiations in LA is no negotiations.
Well, Michael,
How can we solve this if we don't talk about it? Well, we're not going to talk about it. That's how.
I would venture to say, and I may be wrong on this, but I would venture to say that many of those studio executives have meetings with themselves every morning.
Yep. How we doing here?
As soon as they get into the bathroom, or as soon as wifey leaves, there's a little meeting with yourself going on there.
Well, that could be what's powering the entire town right now. It's nervous energy, because once you're in a strike, there's really, if to give up is not an option. You have to come to a settlement. So we're in that spot where finally there is a crack in the solid front that the studios have presented to the Writers Guild of America, and I'm pleased to say that's the way it's going to have to be. There's what's harder to justify, what's harder to explain and understand, is the traditional animus, hatred, resentment, unprofessional attitude that the studios have always had toward the creative element
Well,
in the town
it's been like that
since the beginning,
since the time immemorial.
since Max Roach Studios.
It was like that with Mary Pickford. It
Yep.
was like Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks, right? Am I?
Yeah, and um, I'm an
Uh,
American. Yes, sir. Yes,
right, formed
sir.
United Artists.
Yes.
United Artists was formed because they were so sick of getting bad deals from the studio, and they knew that the studios were nothing without them. The executives weren't going to go on the screen and do the acting,
No.
so they pooled their money together and their power together, and got some people with some money behind them, and opened up United Artists.
It's funny that United Artists went on to be a competitor within the industry, and then it mutated gradually over years to become just another studio without owners that were actors and actresses.
Right.
And so, if you work for United Artists today, or if you're unfortunate that your record in the 1965 was on United Artists, God, that was a forlorn label. They tried, but God, they were forlorn.
And the same thing to a lesser degree happened with Reprise Records,
Yes,
where Sinatra and Dean Martin, virtually the Rat Pack, got together and said, "We don't need these guys.
we don't even like these guys.
Okay, we don't like them. We don't need them. They're taking, the lion's share of the money on all of these records we're doing. We can we can rent the studio.
We
We
don't need
know a
them.
guy that knows how to press records."
Frank Sinatra can call Nelson Riddle and have a deal made tonight.
Right. And so in 19, I guess 60, 61
Somewhere in
was
there.
born Reprise Records. And when you look at the artist now, Reprise, I think, is now part of Warner, right?
Yes,
Is it Warner or Capitol? I forget
Warner.
which one.
Warner. Capital's part
Warner.
of Universal now.
Yeah. When you look at their artist roster and who was on Reprise going through the 60s, there were a lot of Neil Young,
There you go.
a lot of artists that didn't want to conform to the particular system, that wanted freedom. They wanted creative freedom. It really still wasn't all about the money. It was about the money, but yet it was still about creative freedom and all of
And
these.
with all the efforts to get that done, Vinny, over the years, there still was never a record company, even Apple Records, that was independent from the rest of the industry to the point where it was run differently and operated differently and did their business differently. And two sets of books were kept differently.
Right. Well,
There's
everybody thought that they needed the big distribution.
It's a major problem even today. Even today, distribution and promotion are very difficult to come by for independent artists.
But you have YouTube. You have different. The
Different
trends
means,
are made today differently than
yep,
they were back in the 50s. It isn't just radio anymore.
no, not at all. In fact, radio doesn't, it's getting the break that it doesn't deserve in terms of its payments to ASCAP and BMI, which are minimal. They're so pitifully small that it's not even anything to discuss for major stations. You'd be surprised how little radio pays for the unfettered use of music, and that's wrong. But it's historically in the same boat as the strike we have now with the Writers Guild of America. The opposition between artist and company has always been a wide gulf that the company was never really interested in closing.
Right. The thought being is that on the record companies and the artists and management company side, if they play these records, people will run to the stores and buy them. If
Trickle
they
trickle
play
down
these
the
records,
economics.
people will run to the concert halls when they come to town. People will, and that's why, they really didn't care about. I mean, I know they cared about some of the royalties. I nobody never cares about anything here, as a wise man once said. But
But they assumed that the artists were getting better pay than the average Joe,
right
which is not always the
now,
case.
you don't need radio. You can put your 15 seconds or 20 seconds of your song on TikTok,
And see what happens.
and it takes off. You just got to create a social media buzz about it. The whole game is different.
It's a completely different game, and the only reliable form of income from that business is live gigs. That's where
Yeah.
the money has maintained, if not improved, over the years. That leaves the artist with a question to ask: why don't I just do my own recording, distribution, and everything? I may not make a lot of money, but I will make it. I will control the means of dissemination, and if I fail at it, it's my own fault.
And you have that now. I'm sorry. I took my pills just before the show, and I have to have something in my stomach or else.
Or so
I'll-
without problems. So enjoy your breakfast.
So anyway, yeah, the means of production. I mean, it's really the most basic concept. The means of production should be controlled by the workers, right?
It looks great on paper till you need the support of some sort of structure.
You need to. Well, yeah, that is if the workers are educated and smart.
C'est la vie.
That's see,
Alas, he wasn't that smart.
that's why when we hear about communism, the means of production must be controlled by the state. The workers. So in democracy, the means of control are controlled by the workers, but nobody gives the workers credit for being smart, and in many cases, they're not.
It's because there's a separation. There's the work that has to be done, the workers that have to do it, and the people who watch them do it and get paid more than they do.
And the people who have to make sure that the work that they do is quality, is being sent out to the right people,
And sells.
and the payment for that work is being brought back in.
Right.
So
that's one of the events going on in LA this weekend, but not number one. Number one turned out to be a gal named Hillary. Have you heard of her?
Hillary Swank.
No, she doesn't have a last name. She's down off the coast of Mexico right now, but she's coming to make a special personal appearance in Los Angeles. And when she gets here, she will be the first ever of her kind to enter the state of California. We had an alert that a tropical storm hurricane was coming in 1939, and since then haven't heard a peep. But it's changing now. It's already 80 degrees outside. We're going for a high of 92. We're expecting 4 to 10 inches of rain for the weekend. And it's all because the global warming that we've heard about has created something that's never happened before. That is, a hurricane is coming to California. Now, by the time she gets here and hits land, she will no doubt be a tropical storm. I could be wrong about that. I'm not a weatherman, but that's what the pros are saying. Hurricane now, just about a force of 4, or a category 4 hurricane. When she hits San Diego or Baja, she'll begin to degenerate, but she's still coming. So she'll get to us as a tropical storm, and that's never happened before.
It is inconceivable what's going on with the weather patterns on this earth.
How about how about this week of a fire that they've never had in Maui, followed by a hurricane we've never had in California, a week apart?
But there's nothing wrong.
There's nothing has changed. Go to your homes. You'll be safe.
There's no global warming. There's no
shelter in place.
If for no other reason, the thought that Donald Trump, if by some strange miracle, well, it wouldn't be a miracle, it would be a tragic. What's a tragic miracle?
Donald Trump is a good example. It's just a miracle of tragic proportions. It couldn't have happened, but it did.
if he were reelected president, if he were elected president again, I should say, um, all of the stuff that Biden has put in, all of the infrastructure stuff, all of this stuff would go away.
Yes,
Gone. He'd be repealing it, and he would be doing it at a rate that you would never believe.
because he can break things, but he can't build anything. He can break stuff all day. And remember the response that the Trump administration had to the hurricane that hit Puerto Rico.
Yeah,
It was
throwing
virtually
paper towels.
throwing paper towels to poor people who were hoping for some sort of a bailout.
Um, yeah, you know, he's not going to show up, I guess, for the debate. And I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about Trump. It's Friday.
Well, the breaking news from the New York Times this morning is that he has a plan. He's not going to the debate because at the same time the debate is being broadcast, he's going to be streaming a private interview with Tucker Carlson.
Well,
Where he will say something during that interview that will send him to jail for contempt of court. That's my bet.
Well,
get a couple Diet Cokes in him, he'll say anything.
As much as I hate to say this, isn't Chris Christie starting to look a lot better?
Oh. You know,
I mean, out of the assembled multitudes that they have,
he looks smart. He looks plugged in. He looks relative. And the weird thing is, he's not even the number 3 man on their list. He's right. Way down in the pack.
I'm telling you right now, Michael, he's the guy to look out for.
Because he's clever on his feet.
He's the guy to look out for. Because he is campaigning like an old-time campaigner. He's getting people who would never think of voting for him to look at it.
Yeah. I think in the polls that we've seen with all the upcoming caucuses and primaries, people are not ready to dump Trump by any means, but they're thinking about other people. They're considering other things, and they're worried about his exposure to the 4 indictments. It's going to be incredibly difficult for him to juggle them because he's managed to piss off all the judges already, and they're the ones that are going to control the timeline between here and the election, where he has to be and how he has to act and how he must respond. And he's not used to that kind of work. He's not used to being told to get there. In fact, of all the 19 people who have to show up in Atlanta to surrender for the indictment that was just issued, guess how many have surrendered?
Well, none. They're all going to surrender together, aren't they?
Well, they have to surrender as individuals. Whether they do it together is
right. But they're all going to do it. From what I understood, I might be wrong. That they were all going to show up on one day.
I didn't hear that. That's good news. What day though? The last day.
Probably the last day. Yeah.
That'll be a Friday.
I hope they don't show up. I hope that they have to wind up issuing warrants on Friday night, and that they go and they get them. I mean, I would pay to see Trump at Mar-a-Lago, sitting at his dinner table, and 2 federal marshals walk in,
or 20,
and tell the Secret Service people to step aside.
Yeah,
you can stand next to him, you can walk with him.
Don't touch him. He's coming, and you're not.
No, you'd have to let. I think you'd have to let the Secret Service go with him.
Oh, they could go. Yeah,
we're not gonna. Yeah, we're not gonna cuff him, but we're coming into the dining room and we're gonna stand on each side of him and we're gonna take him out.
He's in our possession. He
has a state warrant that's been executed. He was given 10 days to surrender. He didn't. We're taking him right from the dinner table. And
he can bring 1 Diet Coke with him, but he has to hold it in front of him. Yeah.
And that would, to me, that would be a wonderful thing to see. That thing. Well, no, let me take that back. It wouldn't be a wonderful thing to see because it would be it would be injurious to our country.
So ugly and unnecessary.
Ugly and unnecessary, and but that's what this guy's life is about. It's not about making things run smooth. It's about making everything he possibly can ugly and self-serving and putting him in the eye of the media. And certainly, if he were let out of the dining room at Mar-a-Lago by two federal marshals that had him under arrest, that would certainly be an image that would last well into the next century and the century after that. You would see that. You, yeah, and that's what you'd have to teach in history books.
The day that Donald John Trump was arrested, and for something that he could have avoided, for something that he could have easily avoided.
Well, all of this stuff could have been avoided. All of this stuff that we're going through could have been avoided if he told the truth.
If he had been a mensch.
If he doesn't have to be a mensch, if he just did things the way they were supposed to be done. You lose the election, you take it to court. You keep your mouth shut. It's funny because this whole election thing, this is not the first time we've seen this show. We saw this exact same show back in, what was it, 1990? Was it 90 or 90
When Bush ran?
with Bush and Gore? 2000, excuse me. We saw the same exact thing with the hanging chads.
That's right. And how
But
the courts,
right,
how the courts
and it
juggled
went to
that
the
one.
courts, and you might not have liked the decisions that the courts made, but I don't remember George W. Bush standing up and saying, we got to march down to the Capitol and we got to fight for our right. The elections were crooked. And the matter of fact, the people that were actually screaming the elections were crooked were the Democrats.
They didn't like the count in Florida.
Well, they didn't like the hanging chads. That was the
Right.
thing but yet George W. didn't stand up and say, I'm the true president. George W. didn't stand up and say, we gotta, we gotta meet at the Capitol. George W. didn't stand up and say, this guy, or Al Gore didn't stand up and say, I didn't win the election, or I won the election. This guy's a phony. He
It's
stood up and he said, hey, you know what? The Supreme Court ruled. They ruled in his favor. That's it. That's all. I'm disappointed.
in fact the college of I can't think of the word. The problem was not with the election. The problem turned out to be the way the states report to
Right.
and
the electoral college.
The electoral college. Thank you. I don't know what's wrong with me today. But the problem there was that the guy with less votes can beat the guy with more votes if he's got the electoral college vote, and
Right.
that in close elections that's a real problem. And we've had close elections, and it's going to be we pray it's not a problem again. But the strength of the Trump candidacy right now seems to be waning due to his personality, and his problems are too great for most voters to wish away. A lot of his people don't care.
I don't agree with that, Michael. I think there are a number of people in this country that have been brainwashed.
Yes.
About Trump, and they're not coming off it that easy. Now, he's got that 30%.
Yeah, he does.
He's got that 30%.
But it's
He's
not
got
enough.
that 30% in Mahoning County, Ohio. He's got that 30% in Indiana.
He's got it in California.
He's got that 30% in California, in Oregon, in Washington.
Oh yes.
He's got that 30%.
I wonder if he has 30% in Massachusetts. Probably close.
No, I don't think so. I think he's probably got less. Um, but he might have 30% in New York.
Counting Staten Island and all the
Down
ships at
Staten
sea.
Island, yeah, he might have 30% in New York. Um, so the thing about him just drying up and going away, and
Well, just drying up. He won't go away, but he'll dry up a little bit.
60% of that 30% will not care
Never,
if he's
ever.
indicted, if he's
Yeah.
in handcuffs, if he's got to run the country from Dannemora.
Not a bad idea.
Be fun for press conferences. He could sit in the electric chair.
Sit in it every day. I sit in it every day just to prove that I'm a regular guy like everybody else. I sit in the electric chair.
How funny would that be, man? They take the electric chair and they put a desk in front of it, and
Did the electric chair at Dannemora have a nickname? Like there's one in Florida they call Old Sparky because it sort of burns you while it executes you.
I don't know if the one in Dannemora has. Matter of fact, I'm not actually sure that they have an electric chair in Dannemora. To be honest with you, I know they had one in Sing Sing, and somewhere else I forget. Attica, I think, had an electric chair as well.
Must have had a nickname. You're going to go sit in Old Blinky. You're going to go sit in Old Bob.
Well, maybe they could name it Old Trumpy.
You can't do better than Old Sparky, but there you go. Florida had that somewhere.
Have you ever sat in an electric chair?
I have not. You have? Ooh,
Yeah.
A real one? A real one?
A real one at the West Virginia State Prison.
It's got an uncomfortable straight back, doesn't it?
I tell you what, it was the fastest I ever got in and out of a chair in my life. Because as I was backing up into it to sit, to sit, I started
It crosses
to think
your
to
mind.
myself, just not a good idea.
What am I doing this for? I don't have to sit in the electric chair. They don't call it the electric chair because it's comfortable and inviting.
There's some really nasty ass people that have been in this electric chair. So
It's a bad neighborhood.
touched my cheek to it and then just got up and
Off
and
you
one
go.
guy was sitting there and he's taking pictures. He's got his wife taking pictures.
No, this is not a place to relax, sir.
Yeah, this is but yeah, because you can go on tours of the in West Virginia, in Moundsville, West Virginia, the old West Virginia State Penitentiary that they used up until I think 10 or 15 years ago.
Why don't
Well,
they
more than
reopen
that,
it?
probably 20 years ago. You can go on a tour.
You can go on a
There's
tour of
another prison.
Alcatraz. They don't have an electric chair at Alcatraz. I don't think they ever did, but they still have tours. But they're supposed to be kind of haunted.
I have never been to Alcatraz.
I haven't. I've been around it on boats. I've gotten a good look at it. Never put ashore.
I have Italians in the Italian 10 Commandments. It says, "Thou shalt not pay to go to prison."
Yeah.
So if you think you're getting $24.95 out of me to go to Alcatraz,
No.
it ain't happening.
What I like about Alcatraz is for years it was believed that it was escape proof, that no one could survive the two elements of the San Francisco Bay, which are treacherous: the temperature and the tides, and they are remarkable. That big bay fills up and empties out a couple times a day, and if you're in the middle of it, you're going where the water goes. But after all that theory, it's absolutely wrong. There's been a race for the last 20 years called Escape from Alcatraz, where everybody swims from Alcatraz to the shore. Nobody drowns.
Well, that was one of J. Edgar Hoover's things, right? That was
You swim from Alcatraz to this waterfront. You bike from the waterfront across the Golden Gate Bridge to Mill Valley. You run the Dipsy to Stinson Beach. Escape from Alcatraz. Now that's one long race. But the funny part is, the first part is, all you have to do is swim from Alcatraz, and everybody does it. No one is drowned. No one's been swept away. No one's been taken by the currents. They wear body suits now and protection that protect them from the terrible cold water of the San Francisco Bay. And there's it's just a joke that all those years we believed that you couldn't get out of there, and the prisoners believed it as well as the citizens. There was an escape from Alcatraz. We think 3 guys got away. They never did find them, but they came to the conclusion through some things that were sent in the mail later that they did make it away.
Yeah.
But now, when it's Escape from Alcatraz weekend, everybody makes it off the island. It's incredible.
It's amazing to me that, I've just never been a fan of going to prison, visiting or anything. There's a few times that I had to go over to Rikers Island
We're going to go there.
to adjust cars of correction officers to look at damage on a car. So I had to go over to Rikers. And Rikers, I grew up, right? Matter of fact, a friend of mine, Mike Mongaluzzi, lived on the street that they go down to Rikers Island on, Hazen Street.
What's it called?
Good?
Hayes Street?
Hazen, Hazen. If you look at any of the addresses on Rikers Island of the buildings, they're all on Hazen Street. When you go down Hazen Street and you get to 19th Avenue, and there's a bridge that goes over to Rikers Island, and that's where the entrance to Rikers is. That's how they bring the prisoners in and out. And my friend Mike lived on Ditmars Boulevard and Hazen Street, and I remember his mom used to be the school crossing guard. So she said she's had more. I remember she said she had more prisoners waving at her than any one woman in the world.
Last woman on earth.
She's literally the last woman that they would see.
Well, I know what you mean about the vibes and not wanting to be there. I went to San Quentin once and I saw Waylon Jennings there playing live for the prisoners. And it was interesting, and he put on a good show, and he did a good job. But I wanted to get the hell out of there.
Yeah, it's just not you just don't. Having spent the night in jail at one point, I can tell you, with no uncertainty, that you never want to spend another one.
No, one night's plenty. Thank you.
One night's enough. Thank you very much.
You got a great place here. You run it like gangbusters. Hats off to you. I gotta go.
You could do something a little better than a bologna sandwich on stale white bread for breakfast, but hey, that's what it is.
That's bologna. It's a bologna world.
That's what you got, man. You got a bologna sandwich wrapped up in wax paper.
Oh dear, that's grim.
And a cup of Kool-Aid for breakfast. It's 6 a.m.
Good morning, sweetheart.
And you couldn't sleep anyway. And I mean, it was just one of the most disgusting nights of my life. Anyway, it's such
all in all, you'd rather have a hurricane than another night in jail.
I'll take a hurricane. Yeah,
well, we're gonna see what they look like. This is the first one. We're gonna drive it and see if we like it. We're gonna put it on the streets, see if Southern California can handle a hurricane. On the fortunate side, the winds will, by the time it gets here, will be reduced, but the amount of rain that it's bringing with it from the Gulf of Cortez and Baja California and the Pacific Ocean, and we should be getting a lot of rain. Funny thing about rain in LA, though, is it has a hard time getting here. It's coming. It's coming. We're expecting it. Nothing.
Yeah, well, geographically where you are, you have enough mountainous area to protect you, right?
Well, to some extent, there are mountains around the San Gabriel Mountains and the Hollywood Hills and the Santa Monica Mountains, but nothing to stop a hurricane. What we do have better than that probably would be the amount of cooler water between,
Yeah.
as warm as the water is off Mexico right now, where poor Hillary is forming and doing her work. By the time she gets here, she will be a tropical storm, theoretically. This is
Well,
happening quickly. We get tropical weather, but it usually comes from the four corners. And the same kind of weather you might get in Phoenix when they talk about the heavy rains.
the typhoons and what do they call them down there? Derechos, right?
They have a name for it. In
I
fact,
think it's a derecho.
there was a radio station named after the weather. Anyway, that's usually where our
K-Wet.
tropical. No
K-Sun.
doubt.
Their AM would be K-Sun. Their
No,
FM
it was like the Oasis or the rainstorm, or I don't know. What are you going to think? It's a trip.
98.7, The Flood.
Yeah, with the flood. Tomorrow we're changing formats. We'll be the mountain.
Day after that.
We'll be the big tree.
Oh, man. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm looking at the course of the hurricane now, and these certainly do break up and so on and so forth. But good
But she's
God.
coming.
I mean, she's going to be a 1 probably by the time she hits the United States. But again, it's not, you can't always predict where these things are going to go. She makes a little shift outland or a little shift inland, and you could have some serious damage in places like San Diego, right along the coast, L.A., Santa Barbara, and buildings that
The
I've
ports
been
of
down
Long
there
Beach.
enough to know that
Yeah.
are not built to withstand hurricane force winds.
No, they're built to withstand earthquake shakes. Nothing above ground.
They're built to go this way, not that way.
And high winds have a way of finding stuff that's not nailed down to blow around and cause problems with. So mostly we should be getting rain, not the high winds, and a lot of it, 4 to 10 inches.
Well, I will be thinking good thoughts for you, Michael, because I know that it's been a long time since you've been in a hurricane. So
Never. The whole time I went to school in Miami, we
I
never
was
had a
going to say,
hurricane.
even in Florida, no.
No, no. Tropical storms, yes. Torrential rain, yes. Hurricane, never.
I remember my first hurricane. The first one I remember was 1960, I think, or 61. We had just a doozy. I mean, I remember being in the house. We had lived in a brick house and looking out the front window and seeing stuff just fly by.
Yeah.
You
That was
know,
my bike. That was my bike.
yeah, just it would pick up anything that was not nailed down.
Yeah.
And I remember we had a garden in front of the house, not a big garden, and there was a white picket little fence that my mother had put in around the garden. And I never forget it. I remember looking out the front window. My mother was hollering at me, "Don't go near the window.
Right.
Stay away from the windows because something could hit it." But I didn't listen.
That's where the show is.
And yeah, and all of a sudden, boom! That piece of fence lifted up off of the ground and took off down the block.
There was
And
a
I was
hurricane in New York in the 80s. And the only reason I know this is the Kinks wrote a song about it because they were in New York at the time watching the hurricane go by their hotel. And I can't remember the name of it right now, but it's a good song and reminiscent of the fact that New York has something over California, and that is it's had a number of hurricanes over the years.
Yeah. Well, New York is right in that path of that comes up from the Caribbean,
Yeah.
and the hurricanes go up. I mean, obviously there was storm. I mean, they don't even call them hurricanes anymore; they call them storms. But Sandy, in the in the 2000s, I mean, that thing was devastating.
Yes.
Maybe the worst natural disaster. to hit New York and the East Coast, not just New York. I mean, I always say New York, but I mean New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts. That the Eastern Seaboard, really, Delaware, and
That
everything.
whole there was a big storm that hit New York a couple of years ago, maybe 10 years ago, and it brought a lot of high water.
That was
And
Sandy, I think.
was that Sandy? The interesting
Yeah,
thing about it is a friend of mine lived there on the west side in the 80s and said, you don't notice it when you're in Manhattan, but the 80s are elevated above the Midtown. And
right,
so if you look downtown where the water was, it was there, but it never got past, the 30s and 40s. It couldn't get past Midtown because the shape of Manhattan Island. And
right.
it didn't it
Well,
didn't reveal itself till the storm showed how it was built.
and people also forget that a lot of the land below Houston Street is landfill.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's a huge part of Manhattan.
So Canal Street was a real canal.
Canal Street was a real canal. So a lot of it was wetlands, and it was filled in so that they could dig on. As a matter of fact, Battery Park City is all landfill.
Wow.
When I was a kid, if you look at the tip of Manhattan, it comes down kind of like this, like a sharp point, almost like the
Yes.
the point in Pittsburgh.
Yep.
Now you look at Manhattan, the lower Manhattan, and it's pretty well squared off. And there's apartment buildings down there. When I was a kid, Battery Park City wasn't there. There was no Battery Park
Marsh.
City.
Marsh.
It was the river. The
Hmm.
boats used to dock there. There were piers there. And then in the 60s, they started to say, well, we're going to build a World Trade Center here.
On
And
landfill.
of course,
Wow.
we're going to put Battery Park City. We're going to fill all of this in. We're going to change the shape of Manhattan. And they
Just
did
like
it.
that. They did it.
There's streets down there that didn't exist. I'll tell you how long ago when I drove a tow truck. So that was the early 70s. There was no streets there. We
Wow.
used to buy fireworks where Battery Park City is now. We used to go down there and buy fireworks for Chinese sailors that would come in
Yeah.
on ships, and they
Wow.
would have loads of fireworks come in. You get down there and you could buy fireworks, and you'd walk along. It was
Old
all
Town
cobblestone streets,
from the days of the Knickerbockers.
and you had the piers on one side and the West Side Highway
Yeah.
on the other, and that was like that. I mean, I don't know when they started doing Battery Park City, but it was probably 73, 74 when they started filling that land in.
Many other cities would have said, well, you can't build here. It's too wet. It's too watery. It's too unreliable. But in New York, they say, look, we're going to drill down until we find the earth, and then we're going to set our foundation in that so the water won't matter. Get out of the way, please. Step aside if you don't mind.
Yeah, it's an amazing. I mean, it's amazing what they've done with it. I mean, somebody who lives there now, who was born 20 years ago,
I had no idea.
probably has no idea that they're standing on a landfill.
One
But
more
it's
item about this tropical storm we're getting this weekend is the name. What were the chances that it was going to be called Hillary? Couldn't call it Stephanie, couldn't call it Jennifer, had to be Hillary. And you know that the Clintons are saying, when are we going to catch a break? Hurricane Bill, that's right. They'll have Hurricane Bill on the other side for Florida and Tropical Storm Hillary for California.
well, should they have a Hurricane Biff?
You know, the strange thing is, it's been hurricane season for a while and they haven't had any. It was supposed to be a hurricane season for that possibly was going to go into the books as one of the worst or one of the most numerous in terms of the storms that generate in the Atlantic and the Caribbean. But as it is, this one generated in the Pacific. And usually water storms, cyclones, and typhoons are confined to the Far East in the Pacific Ocean. And even Hawaii doesn't get that kind of storm.
Oh.
So this is a weird one. It's like it's in the wrong place. How can you have a hurricane in the wrong place?
Yeah, it just is. Well, that's what I've been saying. Everything is reversed. It's like we live in the bizarro world.
Oh, we do.
You know what the bizarro world is?
This world that we're in right now?
Well, yeah, Superman
Oh,
in the comic books. There's a parallel world
I'm glad
called the
Superman's here
bizarro world.
to relax me because I'm a little tense. I'm glad Superman's going to put this to rest.
Yes. So in the bizarro world, everything that's in this world exists, but bad is good, good is bad.
Oh, dear.
It's just everything is just totally in reverse.
So the Giants win and the Dodgers lose in Bizarro Land.
Right. Superman is kind of white faced because all the bizarro people are kind of white faced and stoned. And it's this whole alternative planet where everything, I forget if the buildings go up or they go into the ground, but there's, for everything that happens,
The opposite happens in Bizarro
the
World.
opposite happens in bizarro world. And that, along with Mr. Mazitopic, keeps
Oh,
busy.
that keeps the world spinning in an uncomfortable way.
Yeah, and I think that has now come to our world. That everything we think is this way is now that way.
So it is indeed a freaky, fractious Friday.
It is, Michael. We haven't freaky or fractious at all yet today. So, what do we have that's freaky and fractious that we can impart to our audience?
I got a UFO story that came out this morning. The U.S.
Okay.
Navy is releasing pictures of a UFO that they filmed emerging from the ocean in 1982. They kept it secret all this time. I haven't seen these. I don't know when the release is going to be out, but not everybody covers UFO stories because there's kind of a tongue-in-cheek aspect to them. And if you see a UFO story on CNN, everybody's smirking and laughing and har har and an elbow to the ribs. And that's prevented it from being taken seriously. But the Navy took it seriously enough to keep it secret since 1982. Now they're releasing it. And the interesting thing is, why can't we find these flying saucers that are part of our everyday life? One theory was that they had bases in the ocean. They said, bases in the ocean. You got to be kidding. With a flying saucer, how are you going to get it in the ocean? Well, it turns out that's exactly where they've been storing them, keeping them out of sight. And the Navy happened to be there when one emerged from the ocean, took off and flew away. Had someplace he had to go to Trader Joe's to get potato chips. And the film should be of interest to everyone because we're making decisions based on our best information, not knowing that the best information may be being kept from us once again. So why did the Navy keep it secret since 1982? Why did they decide to release it is even a better question. What does it portend? And the one thing they don't tell me, Vinnie, in the story, and I read it 3 times, is where they did the filming, where the incident took place. But if it's the United States Navy, I'm going to think that it's somewhere near our shore somewhere. The Tic Tac film that they've been showing everybody for the past couple of months was done off San Diego during naval maneuvers. So where's the parking lot for UFOs off the coast of California? But they're going to have to move them because here comes Hillary. That's a fair warning to all our space brothers who have park them deeper, take them to a trench in place and park them deeper in the ocean. And apparently their vehicles fly just as well underwater as they do over water. They can maneuver them any way they want. They are airtight, watertight, and functioning through some form of propulsion that works in space, in atmosphere, and in water.
Well, Mikey, I don't know. I don't know if this is going to be because this just broke a couple of minutes ago, so it won't be a freaky fractious fun thing. But I have a story about it. James Buckley. Does the name ring a bell?
He's the brother of
William F. Buckley,
William F. Buckley ran for office in New York.
and won on the Conservative Party ticket.
Third
First
party.
senator in I don't know. He ran in 70, so 40 years. So first senator in 40 years to be elected on a third party ticket. And Mikey, you won't believe this,
Is he going to run for president?
but well, he probably do better than he only served one term, 71 to 77, and they wanted to actually run him in 76 on as candidate for president,
Mm-hmm.
and he decided not to. And he's one of two Republicans that I ever actually worked a campaign for.
I liked his brother, William F.
Yeah, and that's partially why I did it, because I thought it was so I used to give out handbills at subway stations and stuff for him.
William F. Buckley had a show on PBS where he could invite anybody he wanted. And who did he invite? He invited Jack Kerouac. Who did he invite? He invited Allen Ginsberg to sit and say what they want. There was no control. It was
Right.
as is and compelling. And I always liked Buckley because he got himself into a nice suit and then he wrinkled it to the point where it was hilarious. And he sat with his legs crossed and he had a clipboard with all the questions on it,
Yep.
and his little smirk. And he had this wonderful, sonorous, hypnotizing voice
And a
manner of
command
speech.
of the English language that was far and away better than
Yeah.
anybody you've ever met.
He was just wicked. He was so smart. And I don't know where he would be today. I don't know where he would find a political home. But the work he did as an interviewer and as a purveyor of different ideas was remarkable. Nobody else had Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac in, except Steve Allen had Jack Kerouac, but nobody else could sit with them and converse about the future of literature or what their work meant.
Well, it's interesting because at that period, and I think the halcyon days of that show were probably 64 to 74, maybe.
And he was a conservative on PBS, and he was very much at home there.
Yeah, and actually, it's interesting because the show Firing Line still exists today. They still run it on Margaret Hoover is the host of it now,
I
who's
didn't know
often
that.
a contributor to CNN. I think she's married to has something going on with that John Avlon guy on anyway. Uh yeah, the show has been on for a gazillion years, and it doesn't have the cachet that it used to have. But the thing about Buckley, William, that is that, like you said, he didn't argue with people.
No,
It wasn't an argument because 95% of the people that were on that show couldn't argue with him.
didn't need to argue. They were in their own lane anyway.
Yeah. He brought, that's exactly it. He brought people in that were in a different lane than he was. And he just let it happen. He was
Yeah.
much like David Susskind was.
I was thinking of him just as you were talking. Susskind had a good show.
He was much like David Susskind. These were talk show hosts that would bring somebody in, set them up with questions, let them say what they were going to say, and have enough credit their audience with enough intelligence that they could decide which one they liked. Did you like did you like the kind of conservative Buckley saying that we must do this, or did you like the Allen Ginsberg who's saying that we have to put acid in everybody's soda? Which one did you like? They didn't or rarely got into arguments.
No.
It was conducted with class. It was conducted. I forget. I think I may be wrong. I'd have to go back and look. But because I saw the Allen Ginsberg show, and I think Ginsberg wore a suit and a tie.
Yeah, yeah, he did.
on the show because
He
there
did.
was code of dress.
Plus, Ginsburg and Buckley were New Yorkers. You know how to show up for a gig like that. But you were going to say something was breaking about his brother.
Oh yes, did I say that he passed away?
No,
I'm sorry. Yes, he just breaking that his brother passed away 101 years old or 100. He was 100.
good for him.
I met him twice. He actually, um, he served his one term. Then but when
Probably didn't like it.
you know what, I really don't think he liked it. I agree with you. I would wholly agree. From what I remember, he was a Republican in a hugely Democratic state.
And he didn't caucus with anybody. That's a
His,
problem.
I think his other guy, his other senator at the time, might have been Javits still,
Jacob Javits.
Jacob Javits. Um, and yeah, it just wasn't. Times were, it was tough for him to get anything done. And he replaced, interestingly enough, he beat the senator who was appointed when Bobby Kennedy was killed.
Oh, who was that?
Because people forget that Bobby Kennedy was the senator from New York
Yes, indeed.
when he was killed. A guy, the name will sound quite familiar to you. Charles Goodall,
Huh.
whose son is the commissioner of the National Football League.
Running with a tough crowd, the Goodall family.
Yep. Um, and yeah, he beat. Yeah, they split the vote. I forget who was running for the Republicans for senator that year. So anyway, Reagan, when he got elected, brought him back in and named him the president of Radio Free Europe.
Wow.
And he served as the president of Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, from 82 until 85,
I
when
would
he
love
was
to do
named
mid
the
love to
United
do
States Courts of Appeal judge.
we should have a Midnight Daddy show and a New York Vinnie show on Radio Free Europe. Late at night, playing the hits.
Really? Remember the commercial they used to air for Radio Free Europe? There would be this guy, and it was obviously a East German, or a behind the Iron Curtain country, and the guy would be like hunched over, and you'd hear an announcer go, on Broadway, do do, going to the Drifters on Broadway. Support freedom, support Radio Free Europe.
Hey, that'll show you something about what we're really talking about when governments are trying to discern what's the best way to serve their people. What makes people happy? Music on the radio, especially if you cannot get it in your country. If it comes in surreptitiously, and the Drifters become symbolic of a completely different thing. Up on the roof means much more to someone who can't go up on the roof than it does to the kid listening in Bordentown, New Jersey.
Yeah. It's, radio still has that power. I'm sure that.
As does music, if we give it a chance.
I'm sure that the people I know, as a matter of fact, because I know, I don't know them personally, but I know of someone who is a Ukrainian musician that was with a band in Russia, left Russia, went back to Ukraine, and puts out reports all the time on what's going on and that what they're doing musically.
Get a local hit. Write about what you see. Write what you know.
That's all you got to do. You write what you see. It's
and we for the most part we haven't had a society where somebody stays at home and writes about the war while other people go to fight it. There was some of that in Vietnam. There was some political and protest songs that came out of that era, but it's hard to have a hit like "Four Dead in Ohio" that resonates when it happens, and then also resonates 10 years later as a song, and then then you forget what the song was all about, and it just becomes an oldie. There's not a
Well,
lot of examples of that.
yeah. I mean, it's the sad thing about those types of songs is that we always manage to circle back to what the song was written about. We always circle back to, um, a uh, change is going to come
Yes,
by Sam Cooke.
hopeful but sad.
Hopeful but sad. I heard that song. I don't know. Yesterday, maybe I was getting out of the car and I heard that song, and I just didn't get out of the car. I listened to the song.
Well, Sam Cooke's got a voice.
Yeah, but the words, too, the way he
Oh
brings the
yeah,
words across. Well, it's not just his voice. I mean, he's got a voice that's like honey dripping down over the words of the song. But the conviction
yeah.
in how he's singing it, and then you go back and you think about the times when he was singing it.
Because his performing career when he was in the South, no doubt, he had to stay in the Chitlin Circuit hotels.
Yeah,
He wasn't staying at the Fairmont in Atlanta.
no, 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 not at all. And here we are. How many years later? I mean, that song was what, 62, 61, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are, how many years later, and we're still talking about the same thing.
True enough.
So write those songs, because if you don't get a hit now, 10 years later, the crap's going to happen again.
And guys like Otis Redding will cover your songs like he did with Sam Cooke's. And also it wasn't long after that Sam Cooke lost his life. He got into a misadventure at a motel that sadly ended his life so unnecessarily, because he had shown through his writing what sort of an artist he was going to be. You don't write a change is going to come without the talent to write another one, and I'm sure he would have been a great soul singer.
I would say to you that with the death the next year, I guess, because he was killed in 64, right?
Somewhere in there.
Nat King Cole died in 65. I would probably hazard a guess that he would have taken that slot, that
Hmm.
Nat King Cole slot, that of at that time most accessible black singer to white people.
Acceptable.
Acceptable.
Yeah, for some reason.
Yeah. For some reason, Nat King Cole was, they could put him on TV. They could, he could have a show. People loved him.
Well, he had a great presence. People did love him.
Yeah.
People,
They didn't, he just had that something about him, that look in his face, that made people comfortable.
and a
Sam
great piano player. A lot of people forget that Nat Cole was a fabulous
Oh yeah,
keyboardist.
Nat Cole Trio was,
Yeah.
a great jazz musician. Sam Cooke had that same thing. He was handsome, but handsome in a way that the average white person would look at him and go, "That's a handsome guy."
And very modern in his ideas and his
Right.
he could
And
play Copacabana. He could play the Village Gate.
right, and that's what TV looked for at that time.
Yeah.
Or the black people that they presented at that time. I mean, you think about it. You know the black people that they put in positions of starring on TV shows and things like that. Like you look
Sammy
at
Davis Jr.
Diane Carroll, who starred in Julia.
Right.
Uh, you
Eartha
know,
Kitt.
Eartha Kitt as Catwoman, Nichelle Nichols
Hmm.
on Star Trek. These were, and it's racist, but these were acceptable. I can't imagine how many times that the Hollywood and it's funny. We'll probably end this as we started. I can't imagine how many times the Hollywood producers got an audience of people with Southern drawls into a screening room
Yeah.
and showed them Nichelle Nichols on the screen. And when three-quarters of the people didn't say anything, that's who we want.
What did they say when they saw Little Richard and his band in white suits playing Tutti Frutti? That's something that the energy was so unbridled and strange and wonderful and alluring that most people still haven't seen that much juice come off the stage. Little Richard
Well,
and
I
his full band.
I am really excited to see this documentary on CNN about Little Richard.
Right.
I am. There's another documentary that I haven't watched yet. I'm a Little Richard fan. Um, he, he gave Elvis his act.
Oh yeah.
People are going to look at that and say, "Wow, he's just like Elvis." No, no, no.
Other way
Elvis
around.
was just like Little Richard.
And his energy was so that even the Beatles tried to emulate it, but they had their own version of it. But nobody did
Yeah.
Little Richard like Little Richard.
I mean, "She Loves You" is a direct rip of a Little Richard
Yep.
uh, vibe with the
Riff.
woo.
Yeah, the whole ooh thing came from Little Richard. My God, he
Yeah,
invented that. And
yeah.
imagine the guts with that pompadour and a big white suit, banging on the piano and playing like a man possessed, and singing with a voice that had an incredible range and such power. Little Richard was a powerful delivery.
I saw Little Richard at the Academy of Music. This had to be 19. What was the 1970? Maybe 71. I'll tell you what. Maybe it might have even been 69, but I think it was 70. And he was on one of the oldie show tickets that Rock Magazine used to put together. These were before the big ones at the Garden. They put together these oldie shows that were at the Academy of Music. They were sponsored by Rock Magazine. I don't know if you remember Rock Magazine.
Oh, yeah, I do.
And he came out, and I had never seen him live before. I'd only seen, and in those days, you didn't even really get to see a lot of what the artist was. You only heard him.
He's a big man.
And he was a big guy in a suit. He had a white suit on, and he kicked the freaking piano across the stage while he was playing it. He would play it, and he would knee the piano and push it across the stage. He was like, and
Pounding it for
he's
all he's
doing One
worth.
Tall Sally, man, and it's just he's moving, the piano's moving, he's jumping up, he's jumping down, he's all over the place. He's at this side of the piano, he's at that side of the piano, he's up on the piano playing it backwards. You just never seen anything like it.
Nothing. A force of nature.
You never, to this day, I've never seen, and I saw Jerry Lee Lewis, and I just never, ever saw anything like that on stage.
He was really a remarkable,
And
tortured genius.
and one of his songs that is overlooked because it came out, it wasn't at, it certainly wasn't at the height of his career or anything. It came out in like 69. And it still to this day sits as one of my favorite all-time songs, is a song called Freedom Blues.
Mm-hmm. That might have been when he was on Reprise, right? He was
Yes,
on
it was.
Reprise
It was on
yeah.
Reprise. We talked about artists that going on there, go on a record where they could do what they wanted to do.
Right.
and he had it was a minor hit, you know. I mean, it got played on. I mean, it definitely got played on WOR FM,
Right.
you know, or
I
something
know.
like that, you
Yep.
know. But it wasn't. It wasn't a mainstream record, but it's one of the best damn records you'll ever listen to. I'm surprised that nobody's covered it yet. It's sitting there waiting for somebody to pull out of the
Yeah,
heat
right.
and cover.
I'm pretty sure I have that in my Spotify, but I'm going to make sure I have it. Freedom Blues. One of the things that Little Richard taught everybody was that you could drive the crowd wild. It wasn't just a dance party where everybody was nice, no sweating, nobody sweat, no close dancing. It was unbridled energy, the likes of which hadn't been on stage. Other groups that had big hits, even if they were black groups from the cities, they had choreography, they had harmony, they had a presentation,
You guys know how it is when you buy a new Mac.
they had all the things that we see now when we see one of those shows from Pittsburgh done by your pal.
Well, you know what? I just watched a bunch of those last night. He's put them all up on YouTube now. And I watched. What did I watch last night? I watched the Brooklyn. You had the Brooklyn Bridge. You had the Cadillacs. What else did I see? And
Five
Jerry
Satins.
Butler.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I remember that show.
The Skyliners. Jerry Butler got to be. I mean, talk about a guy who never got credit for being as cool as he is.
He's pretty cool.
Although he's so cool that his nickname is the Iceman.
What are you going to do?
That's him. Let me see if I can crank this up here real quick and see if maybe let me know if you can hear it. You hear it?
Yeah.
I hope that I should live to see when every man knows he's present sufferings from the past. I make our hearts a bit of sad. I got my duty rock and roll. Now everybody's gotta be free, y'all. La 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 la. Let's get rid of that old man head and bring our fellow man up to date. It may seem very hard to do. Just open your mind and love to do. You hear me calling in my baby. Everybody's gotta be free. Oh yes.
Little Richard. Yeah, 1969.
Wonder how many times they took that song. Probably not that many. Richard, we're going to
You
go back
know
and
what?
fix a few spots, but right now it looks like it's a hit.
If I know Little Richard at all, he probably walked in the studio and said, "Let's go, boys.
Yeah.
I got
places-
somewhere
I got-
to be at 4 o'clock.
Yes. I believe that's exactly what he would say. Got to
I
do
got
Mike
somewhere
Douglas.
to be."
Can't be here cutting records with you guys. I got to be on the Mike Douglas show talking about my cape.
Yeah. And yeah, what an artist. I hope that this documentary that they're putting out, you see, here's the thing. There's the other documentary that's on I think it's Netflix or Amazon, I forget, explores him as the first queer artist.
Yeah. I've seen that, I think.
Yeah. And while for a certain amount of people, it's just not going to click. They're going to see that and they're going to go, "Ugh." It's just how people are, man.
I know.
But this documentary, I hope, will be more centered on what he meant to the music, not to the gay community. Because he meant a lot to the gay community.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
And he was a super Christian at the same time. He was a preacher man.
oh, he stopped. The famous story, right, about the plane. He was in the
Yeah.
plane, 1959. He was in a plane, and the plane started having trouble. It was had turbulence, and it was bumping up and down and boom, 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 and they thought they were going to crash. And little Richard got on his knees in the center aisle of the plane and said, "Oh Lord God, if you save me, I will stop singing the devil's music." And the freaking plane straightened out and started flying. And he did gospel for how many years?
Yeah, he did a lot of it. He did.
He did gospel for probably, I mean, he really switched his career in 59 and started doing gospel stuff probably till the mid 60s.
Yeah, he flip flopped a couple times on whether he was going to be a man of the cloth or not. The interesting thing that I remember about those first albums on Specialty Records was that Richard is on the cover, shouting and sweating. His tie is loose, his collar is open, and he is working. He would be a ball of sweat on stage. It was a physical expression of whatever was driving Little Richard. And the fascinating part about that is, as a kid, I was 12 or 13 maybe when I first heard Little Richard. I don't know how old I was. My cousin Gary was older than I was. He was in high school, and he had the Little Richard, the first album. This is Little Richard, or Hello Little Richard, or whatever it was called on Specialty Records. And I couldn't believe it. I had never heard anything like that in my life. And I was already buying Ray Charles records and all
The Marcells, yeah.
all the hits of the day. I was glued to the radio. I had to have those 45s. There was nothing in the atmosphere, nothing in the solar system that held a candle to Little Richard. There were not two Little Richards. There was just one. And my God, he was like a jet plane going by.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because you listen to, again, you go back and you dig out early recordings from, it's all on YouTube. I mean, you can find it pretty easy these days. 20 years ago, you couldn't find this stuff, but now it's all up there. Go back and dig out the Quarrymen and listen to what the Quarrymen sounded like, and then and then kind of mark that, and then listen to what they sounded like after Little Richard hit over in England.
They made us like, they went from skiffle to rock and roll.
Yeah. Well, I talk about boys. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's, straight stuff. All right,
well,
Mike.
they did Long Tall Sally for a long time. Okay, Ben, have a good weekend. I'll have a wet weekend, and we'll meet after the hurricane.
Stay dry, and I will catch up with you on Monday morning if the Lord's will and the creek don't rise. So listen to Drive Time tomorrow morning.
Oh, yes, 8 o'clock.
8 o'clock, going to have a good show for you. We're going to go down to Monterey. Hopefully it's not going to get rained out down there for the for its car show week in May. So the concours.
The concours d'elegance?
The Conkers, yeah, the Conkers. All right, man. Peace, love, and man, Shevitz.